Today's lesson is lesson 5.2, and we're talking all about angle relationships. So yesterday we talked a lot about classifying them as acute, right, obtuse, reflex, different things like that. Today we have quite a bit of new vocabulary, as you can see, and we're going to be looking at all of these terms to help us today. So our goal, I can find angle measures using reasoning and without measuring. So protractors, we do not need them right at this moment. All right, we're going to be hopping around a little bit, but right away you need to turn to math page 166, and you should have your vocab sheet out in front of you. Okay, so right now we're not actually going to look at the top at the math message because we are going to be talking about adjacent angles. So I'm going to be zooming in down here for us to take a look. Adjacent angles are angles that are right next to each other. They have a common vertex, they have a common side. So if I look at this one, this is my vertex, we're on number 7 right now, and a common side would mean, for example, angle F here, and this measure 47 degrees, their common side would be this line right here. So these two would be considered adjacent angles. They have a common side and a common vertex. We are actually going to be skipping consecutive angles today. That's something we'll talk about in the future, so something not to forget about, but we don't really deal with those in the math problems we're working on today. So that brings us now to perpendicular angles, and we don't have an example on this math journal page, so I'm going to be making an example for you right here. So here's our example of our perpendicular angles. When we hear the word perpendicular, we know we're talking about something that has a 90-degree angle measure. So on both sides of this you can see 90-degree angles. So these two angles, let's call this one angle A and this one angle B, are perpendicular angles. Moving on now to supplementary angles. Whoops, I want to highlight that for us. Supplementary angles. So supplementary angles, this might be something that you remember from maybe back in 5th grade perhaps, and we're going to zoom in down here and we're going to look at number 4. So number 4, what we can look at is we see that we have a straight angle right here at the bottom, and then over here we have 150 degrees. Now we know that straight angles measure 180 degrees. So these two angles, angle A, and then let's just call this one again, we'll say angle C, are supplementary angles. And that is because supplementary angles are two angles, like this one A and C, whose sum is 180. So we can see that because we see a straight angle right here at the bottom, and we know that 150 plus our angle A will add up to 180, which makes it a supplementary angle. So before we move on from supplementary angles, now we said we know that these will add up, the sum will be 180. So let's find our answer there. 150 plus what equals 180? The answer would be 30, and don't forget your symbol, degrees. Now our final vocab that we're going to look at together is vertical angles. This one is really fun, I think. It's a good way for us to find angle measures using reasoning. So let's look at number 6 on page 166 right here. Right away, I can see that I have two straight lines that are intersecting. Intersecting means they're crossing each other. So think of an intersection in the road. They're crossing each other. Now I know that straight lines or straight angles have a measure of 180 degrees. That's something that we're going to use to help us today. Also, I can see that with two lines intersecting, I have two pairs of opposite angles. Angle E is opposite to angle C, and then we'll call this one angle G, is opposite to angle D. So two pairs of opposite angles here. Now, what's really cool about this and what I like about these vertical angles are that with these, I can look and say, okay, I know that G is 115 degrees. Its vertical angle, angle D, will have the same measure, which means down here that the measure of angle D is equal to 100 and 15 degrees. Don't forget your symbol. So now what we're left with, we still have angles E and C, and we don't know yet what the measures are. So thinking back to supplementary angles, we do know that two angles that have a straight line will add up to 180 degrees. So we need to do a little math here. 180 degrees minus our chunk 115 that we know leaves us with the measure of angle E equaling 65 degrees. And I'm just writing these up here for a little visual for you. So that tells us that the opposite, or the vertical angle of angle E, angle C, will also measure 65 degrees. And that's how we can use reasoning to find vertical angle measures. Now I've left you with number 5, number 7 to do, which you should be able to use reasoning to find those on your own. Let's just quickly look up here at our math message. So with our math message, we have our angles up at the top, and it's asking you to actually measure them. So up here, you will be using your protractor. Now keep in mind what we've learned. We see two straight lines intersecting, so you do have some sets of opposite angles here. So if you measure one side, you should be able to find the measure of the opposite angle, or the vertical angle. Now that means for number 3, you're a little bit ahead of the game. What do you notice about the angle measures? You are going to notice that vertical angles, like this one and this one, are going to have the same measure, same degree measure. So make sure that you write that down in a complete sentence. Your assignment for today is Math Journal, pages 166, which we started together, and 168. You do not need to do 167. You have a study link, 5.2, which you should have already. And for IXL, we've had lots of questions about this, but I'll make a little list here. CC2, CC3, CC7, CC8. Those would all be good things to practice. You're getting into some reasoning, finding angle measures in shapes. So that's moving on to something that we'll be touching on later. One more thing before I let you go, you will be asked in your math box for sure today to write down the name of an angle. So when you're writing the name of an angle, let's say that I have these two angles right here, and I'll label these quickly. You can see that I labeled and I put some points on there, L, M, N, O, and then I'm going to put our middle one as P. So let's say they want you to write down the name of this angle right here. What you need to do, some of us needed to review this from yesterday, is you need to write down, first of all, the symbol that represents angle. So angle, and if you're trying to name this angle right here, you can name it a couple of ways. You could call it M, P, N. We could go in reverse and you could call it NPM. The important thing is that our vertex is in the middle. That's the angle, that's the point that we would measure. So make sure that you are remembering that as you're writing down the names of angles today.